Yesterday morning, I had the opportunity to go to the 6th annual Men's Catholic Conference at the A.J. Palumbo Center at Duquesne University. Along with 2,000 men in our diocese and the neighboring diocese of Greensburg there, to listen to captivating, inspiring, motivating, challenging messages to fight the good fight. Good speakers, free from the priest. I listened to the talks. Matthew Kelly's written 13 books, an Australian man, great, captivating speaker. Rousing the men to go to monthly confession. How challenging and daunting. Do it for a year. Tell me how you feel. Tell me if your souls come back to life. Tell me if you think and live and act and speak in a new way. I dare you. Monsignor Jim Lasante from Oakville Center, New York, challenging the men to live deeper love, greater love, Christ's love. Dr. Scott Hahn, speaking about his conversion as a Protestant minister, written over 40 books. And then Father Scott Seethaler, who we're familiar with in Pittsburgh. Perhaps one of the most moving moments, there was a holy hour and I got to speak to Bishop Zubik, but the bishop said the biggest sorrow of his day is he wasn't able to lift the monstrance, Jesus, up. Not physically lift him up, but he said, I beg for God's mercy on my soul when I haven't lifted Jesus up for others, spiritually. I haven't lifted Jesus up for others. Would we have the grace to ever say that? I didn't lift Jesus up today. I didn't see beyond my own world, my own self. I didn't lift anybody or bring anybody back to life because of my faith. Today's first reading, the major prophet Ezekiel talks about a time when the nation of Israel is in Babylon. They're in exile. It's a time of despair and despondency and disillusionment. It's a spiritual winter, if you will. It's desolation. It's a troubling, dark time for the nation. And Ezekiel says, God breathes His Ruach, His living Spirit, so that your dry bones, your weariness, your complacency, your apathy, your indifference, your sinfulness will come to life. And you will live by God's pneuma. We get the word pneumatology, a new, animated, energized, enthusiasm, inspired by new life, because God's divine life, supernatural life, is in your soul. And all you need to do is to be aware and to alert and to awaken it from the dormancy of the living dead. What Ezekiel is saying is we build our own graves and our own tombs. I don't know what your tomb is today. Maybe you're in the tomb of a debt that is so dark and so deep and so big and so cavernous that you can't even begin to imagine ever getting out of debt. Maybe there's an avalanche of hurts that have mounted and escalated that you can't forgive any longer. And there's dark abyss within the vortex of your spirit that you haven't forgiven or been forgiven. Maybe your tomb is a tomb of your own self-preoccupations that have led you to this large emptiness. Your dreams and your hopes have evaporated. And you live in this weariness as if there is no hope or no God or no tomorrow. How does this darkness envelop us, friends? As I was opening the church yesterday morning, early after I went to the gym, by the way, they gave me a key for the gym now. I can go anytime I want. Huh? It took 3 years to finally, trust me, get the key to the gym, but now I got it. Huh? So, this man's there at the door yesterday, early in the morning on Saturday. And I'm opening the door, and he seemed so burdened and so troubled. And he said, "Thanks for opening the door. I was waiting. I have this big burden. And I need to get under the cross. And I need to pray about it." I made the sign of the cross on the man's forehead. Be delivered. Come out. Untie him, Lord. Now, I had read the gospel. I reflected on the gospel of Lazarus, huh? So I knew he was in a tomb. I knew he was in a grave. I knew he was dead. So I opened the door and made the sign of the cross, and he comes up here to pray. And he tells me the darkness he's in. And I said, "I'll be praying for you this weekend, that the Lord will lift you up, give you a new hope and a new beginning." Paul, in his letter to the Romans, says that we live under the tyranny of the flesh, the sarx in Greek, the sliminess of our passions, anger, lust, pride, greed. If you live in that seedbed, Paul says, you're dead. And you are already in a tomb. And Paul says, but because you have the Spirit of God living in you and breathing in you and animating you and gracing you, you don't live by your raw, unredeemed human nature. By its nature, it has a propensity and proclivity to selfishness and sinfulness. But when we're elevated by God's grace, we live in a Christian way, a Christian life. We don't live as if we're unredeemed or unsaved. Paul says we work out our salvation day by day by tending to the flame of the Spirit within us and never letting it be extinguished, no matter how dark it gets. How grave are our tombs. We often say we're digging our own grave, where the grave is getting bigger and darker and enveloping us into emptiness, meaninglessness, misery. Jesus wants to lift us out of the tomb of our sin. Do we want to be delivered? Lazarus means God to my rescue, God to my help. Lazarus is not just Martha and Mary's brother who's been dead and Jesus doesn't get there in the nick of time. And Jesus could have seemed like he was put out, but he just said to Martha so lovingly, I know he'll rise again. And she comes to this awareness of a deep faith that he is the resurrection and he is the life. That he has a richer and a fuller life. And Jesus' resurrection and Lazarus' resurrection is the foretaste and the promise of our resurrection. That we too will rise with Christ. That Christ will overcome and Christ will make us victorious no matter what tomb we've been in, for how long we've been in it, no matter what grave we've been in. That God will lift us up and give us new hope because we fight the fight and we run the race and we hold on to faith. Archbishop Tim Dolan in New York just challenged all New Yorkers to go to confession during Lent. Knock the door off the hinges. Liberate your hearts. Break the tomb that you're in because God calls you by name to come out. Come out from the tomb. Come out from the darkness and and to walk in the light. We saw 2 weeks ago how Jesus loved the Samaritan woman at the well. She had looked for love in all the wrong places, and Jesus tapped something in her that no one had tapped. Jesus showed her love, and then she brought that love to the world. Last week we heard the story of Jesus healing the blind man and opening his eyes to physically see, but opening the darkness of his spirit to see and believe. And today we have, on this 5th Sunday of Lent, the story of Lazarus, where God calls him at the house of Bethany. House of Bethany means the house of the afflicted, the sinners, those who are wounded, those who are injured. We gather in the house of Bethany today, and our spirits shriek, cry out for God to deliver us from death. And the greatest death, friends, is spiritual death. When we live in a spiritual winter, of being trapped and entombed by disappointment, by hurts, by griefs. And whatever the tomb is, friends, Jesus calls us to new possibilities, to new hopes, to new belief. He calls us out like he called Lazarus, come out, go free, unbind the trappings of death. Live life to the fullest, the life you've been given by a loving God, who's not a God of death, but a God who conquered death, who overcame the tomb, and died on the cross for the world's salvation. Death is not the end of the Christian story. It's the beginning of a new, full, richer life, wonderful life with God. And all of us will die one day. Everything we've come to know on earth will die. But death marks the entrance of a new life, an eternal life. Each day as we work out our salvation on earth, our God calls us back to life. That back to life we call faithfulness. Back to the heartbeat of the covenant of God. To be alive. You know, recently the Bishop of Madison, Wisconsin passed away. His name was Bishop Bullock. He was 84 years of age. And whenever a bishop becomes a bishop, he takes an Episcopal model. Bishop Bullock's motto was simply 3 words: grace, mercy, peace. The last 2 days I've been trying to own that motto myself. Do I live in God's grace fully each day? Do I manifest in the misery of my human condition the mercy of God's divine love and forgiveness? And do I know that the greatest gift I could bestow on anyone else on my journey is the resurrection, shalom, peace, right harmony of relationships. In the passing of Bishop Bullock from Madison, Wisconsin, I pray for all of us as we continue to fight the fight, as we continue to seek to be alive, as we continue to name the things that entomb us and put us deep in a ditch, that God will give us the grace to believe again, that God will show His mercy on us sinners, and that we will have the peace that this world could never really fully give us, but only Christ can give us, because we follow Him, we walk with Him, and we live with Him. One day, we will all go in the grave, and our time on earth will have ended. We will call out to the Lord to come to us, to show us His grace, to give us His mercy, and to give us the peace we so ardently long for.